If I go to Solution Explorer and open the program.cs file, you can see in the routing we have something called as controller and action. Remember these keywords for now. If you open the Solution Explorer again, you will notice we have a folder with the name of controllers, we have models, and we have views. That basically defines the MVC keyword. MVC stands for models, views, and controllers. But how do all three of them come together? Let me show you a brief overview about that. In the MVC architecture, as I said, first letter stands for model. Model represents the shape of the data. So if you have any tables or if you have any classes, model will have all of that. And what I mean by class is, let's say you are building an e-commerce application where you have products, you will have orders, you will have order details, shopping cart, and much more. Models will basically have all of those class files. Next, we have something called as view, which stands for the user interface. So whatever you see on the screen, that is the view part of the MVC application. So model represents the data, and what you see on the screen is the user interface, like if you have a form or if you have a fancy chart that you see on the browser, all of that is represented by the view. View will control the HTML element of your web project. Now you have the view where you have the fancy HTML that you see on the screen. But when you have the data, you will have to process or even fetch that data, because data might be inside database. So you need something to fetch that data and display that in a table on your HTML view that you have. That missing piece or heart of the MVC application is the controller, which is the last piece of the missing block here. Controller will basically handle the user request, and it will act as an interface between model and view. What happens is when a user clicks on one of the button or opens the website, the request will first go to the controller. Controller will then determine what model it has to fetch. It will retrieve all the data that is needed using the models, and then it will pass all the data that is required to be displayed to the view component. What view will do is it will add all the data in its HTML formatting and pass that data back to the controller, and then controller will send that response back, and the data or website will be displayed on your screen. So one thing that you should always remember is, in an MVC architecture, controller is heart of your application. And it might sound like I'm repeating this over and over again, but MVC architecture can be tricky to understand if you are getting started. So let's walk through that again. When a user opens a website, it goes to a controller. Controller will then fetch data from the models or wherever it has to do, process that data, like there might be some conversion or anything that it has to do, and once the data is in good shape, it will pass that data to the view. On that static HTML, it will add the data that controller has passed. Like in view, we might have defined that there is a table, but what data that table needs, we will pass that from controller to the view. Then view will add that data in the HTML, and final content, it will return back to the controller, which will ultimately be passed on to the user screen, and user can see the complete website. This, my friends, is the basic architecture of an MVC application. Now, a controller can have many action methods. Action method basically define the endpoints in a controller, and we will uncover that in the next video. But there is something called as action methods there as well. If I go back to the website here, you can see where we have the default route. We are saying that if nothing is defined, you should go to the home controller, and there you have index action and something called as ID. Let's ignore that. Right now, you know the basic MVC architecture, and let's cover this routing in the next video.